Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a soldier or a queen or a prisoner. You're just a rugby player, or a friend of one. Or maybe you were invited along because someone had an extra seat. Either way, you board the plane without thinking much of it. A chartered flight across the Andes. There's wine in the luggage, laughter in the cabin. No one knows that the flight crew's navigation is off by nearly 60 kilometers. No one knows that in just a few hours, you'll be picking glass out of your skin and praying over what's left of your friends. The crash isn't the worst part. It's not even close. Before the silence sets in, that sharp white silence that sinks into your teeth and never quite leaves, do me a small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love hearing who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more slow disasters, like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You don't think much of the flight at first. It's just another leg in a long journey. You're young, maybe you're 19, maybe 22. You're on the old Christians Club rugby team, or you're travelling with them, family, a girlfriend, a loyal friend tagging along for the trip. Montevideo to Santiago. It sounds exotic, even glamorous, but the plane is anything but. It's a military transport aircraft, an FH-2-27D, leased from the Uruguayan Air Force. Compact, no frills. Just rows of hard seats and cold metal ribs behind thin upholstery. The kind of plane you wouldn't think could cross a continent, and it won't. You sit close together, laughing, joking, tossing bags up into racks that rattle even before takeoff. You tease your teammates, trade stories about who's going to hook up with a Chilean girl first, who'll get too drunk, who'll score the winning try. There's talk of snow in the Andes, but no one's worried. You're athletes, the kind of people who don't get scared of a little weather. The kind of people who still believe in plans. Someone opens a bottle of wine before you've even cleared the airport. The air smells like excitement, sweat, and something faintly metallic. No one notices the last part. As the plane rises, it's loud. The kind of loud you feel in your ribs. You chew gum to stop your ears from popping. You watch clouds spill like dirty cotton across jagged peaks. You don't know much about altitudes or pressurization, or how thin the air gets above 12,000 feet. But you're starting to feel lightheaded. The inside of your nose dries out. The sky's too white and too close. The windows fog around the edges, and the wingtips jitter against gusts you can't see. At 3:21 p.m, you hear the co-pilot radio, Chilean air control. He believes you're past the mountains. He's wrong. He requests descent. He begins to turn north, thinking the worst is behind you. It isn't. The plane begins to drop, engines straining in the thin air. You're chatting with the person beside you, or maybe dozing lightly, when you feel the first hard jolt. Not turbulence, something sharper, like a wheel catching a rock. Then another, stronger. Then the scream of metal being peeled back like a sardine can. You're not flying anymore. The wing clips a ridge at 13,800 feet. A second later, the tail shears off, vanishing into the cloud with 4 passengers still strapped inside. They're gone before you even understand what's happened. The fuselage spins mid-air. The right wing goes next, taking the engine with it. The remaining piece of the plane, the long, narrow cabin where you're sitting, tumbles nose first into a glacier valley. The pilots are still trying to pull up, but they don't have wings anymore. The nose slams into the snow, tears off, and ejects both pilots into the mountain. The rest of the fuselage skids for hundreds of feet. Metal groaning, people screaming, limbs flailing, blood already on the windows. It finally stops when it wedges against a snowbank at the bottom of a narrow, icy ravine. There's a moment of silence that isn't really silent. Your ears are ringing. The snow is still falling outside, soft and steady. Someone nearby is making a wet, high-pitched noise. You realise it's you, or maybe it's not. Someone else is sobbing in Spanish. Someone is moaning your name. Your teeth are chattering, but you can't feel cold yet. You can't feel anything. Not your legs, not your fingers, just pressure, dampness. The way blood feels when it soaks through denim and dries into something stiff and sticky. You're alive. That seems impossible. You look around. Someone in the seat ahead of you is slumped forward, head twisted at a bad angle. You call their name. They don't respond. You call again. Louder. They don't have a face anymore. You turn away and vomit. The smell is already changing, from smoke and metal to blood and something that doesn't quite register. The temperature inside the fuselage is below freezing, but your body is still in shock. The seats are torn from their bolts. A section of wall is peeled open, exposing the white void beyond. A boot hangs halfway out of a hole in the cabin wall. No foot inside it, just the boot. Your mind refuses to accept the rest. You hear others moving, counting heads, calling out names like their spells. Some people are missing, some are dead, some are clearly dying. One boy holds his own leg in both hands, still attached but barely. Another girl is staring at her arm like it doesn't belong to her. One of the co-pilot's teeth is stuck in a seat cushion. You stare at it longer than you should. The sun is dropping, the cold finally registers. A creeping, dry cold, not like winter in Montevideo, not like anything you felt before. You think about frostbite in the abstract, and then you realise it's already setting in. The first decision you have to make isn't how to survive. It's whether to move the dead out of the fuselage or leave them where they are. There's no right answer, just more cold and more silence. It will be days before anyone even knows you're gone, and weeks before they stop looking. But for now, you sit very still, covered in someone else's blood, listening to the wind thread its way through the ruined plane. The kind of wind that doesn't care if you're alive. You don't know how long you've been sitting like this. Minutes, an hour maybe. Time has gone thin around the edges. You've stopped shaking, which doesn't feel like a good thing. Around you, the world is smeared in white and red and steel. The fuselage has split like an overripe fruit. One end peeled back into the snow, the other twisted into a half-capsized husk. Shattered seats, ripped flooring. Luggage spilled across the aisle like confetti from a cruel parade. You can hear someone sobbing not far off. Someone else is repeating a name over and over, like a prayer or a denial. A third person is silent in a way that already feels permanent. You manage to lift yourself upright, inch by inch. Your head throbs. Your vision tilts and swims. The air burns in your nose, your throat, your lungs. The altitude is over 11,000 feet, but you don't know that yet. You just know it feels like breathing through a pinhole in a snowstorm. Your hands shake as you unclip your belt. You try to stand, but the pressure in your knees says no. Crawling will have to do. You see faces you recognise. Most of them are twisted or dazed or too still. Someone is yelling for help in Spanish. Another calls for their mother. Someone is laughing too loudly, the sound wrong, unhinged. You spot Nando Parado lying unconscious across a row of seats. His skull is cracked open, but he's breathing. Others aren't. One of your teammates is folded beneath the metal frame of his chair, his eyes wide but seeing nothing. Another boy's leg is bent sideways. The bone is visible. You look away before you start to gag. There's blood, so much blood. Not all of it fresh. Some of it is already darkening in the cold air. Your own hands are smeared with it, but you can't feel any pain. Your body has gone somewhere else for the moment. Somewhere quiet, detached, survival mode maybe, or numbness. Hard to tell the difference. You aren't alone in moving. Others are dragging themselves into clearer space, checking on the injured, trying to identify the dead. The list is already longer than you'd like. At least a dozen didn't make it through the crash, some ripped from their seats and ejected into the snow, others killed on impact. The two pilots are gone. The cockpit tore away mid-fall and was found hundreds of meters up the slope, twisted against a rock outcrop. Colonel Ferradas died instantly. La Gurara survived a few minutes longer. long enough to whisper something unintelligible before going still. Someone checks the overhead bins for supplies, a few blankets, a bottle of wine, a tin of sweets that was meant to be a gift, not much else. You gather what you can and pile it near the centre of the cabin. No one knows what else to do. There is no fire, no radio signal, no sign that anyone is coming. A few of the boys decide to scout the immediate area. They clamber up the slope beside the wreck to look for the tail section, which broke off mid-air and vanished into the clouds. If they can find it, maybe they can retrieve the emergency beacon. Maybe there's food, medicine, a working radio. They don't find it. Just white on white on white. And silence. So much silence. It presses against your ears like cotton soaked in ice water. Those left behind begin triage, not professionally. None of you are doctors, but with whatever instinct you can summon. Broken limbs are braced with torn wood and strips of coat lining. Cuts are pressed with fabric until they stop bleeding. A few of the injuries are too serious to do much for. One girl's breathing is wet and ragged. You can hear fluid in her lungs. Another boy's abdomen is swelling at an alarming rate. You all know what that means, even if no one says it. You do what you can. It isn't enough. Time slips sideways. You try to guess how many hours have passed since the crash, but the light doesn't change much. The sky's white with cloud and snow glare, too diffuse to track the sun. Your watch stopped sometime during the impact. A crack runs through the glass. You check it anyway, out of habit more than sense. When you think to check your pockets, you find a handful of peanuts, a lighter, and a photograph of someone you now realise you might never see again. You fold it carefully and slip it back inside your coat. You don't want to lose it. You don't want to lose anything else. You've moved the bodies to the back of the fuselage. It's not out of disrespect. It's just that you need the space for the living. You arrange them gently, laying coats or blankets over their faces. One of the older boys says a prayer under his breath as he does it. You don't know the words, but you stand with him anyway. It feels like the right thing to do. The snow begins to fall again. Light, persistent, as if trying to make up for the violence of earlier. It coats the broken metal, the torn insulation, the frozen blood. It softens everything, but not enough to forget where you are. One of the group, someone practical, someone scared, starts gathering cushions and scrap metal to build a crude barrier at the torn edge of the fuselage. It's not much, but it blocks the wind a little. A gesture toward warmth, if not actual heat. There is no firewood, no trees, no fuel, just snow and stone, and the wind whispering between the cliffs. You realise, suddenly and completely, that you are alone, that the plane didn't land. It vanished, that the mountains are so much bigger than any help that might be coming. Still there's hope. People say things like, they'll find us and planes don't just disappear. You repeat these things too. Not because you believe them, but because belief feels like something warm to hold on to. You talk about how search planes must already be in the air. You imagine them scanning radar, plotting trajectories, making calls. Somewhere, surely, someone is looking for you. You tell yourself that again and again, because the sun is beginning to slip behind the ridge, and the temperature is dropping with it. And you are still alive, but you are not warm, and you are not safe. That first night, no one really sleeps. You lie there stiffly, half covered by someone else's coat, your cheek pressed to cold metal, and your feet tucked under the curve of another body. Someone tries to count the hours by watching the stars. Someone else swears they hear a plane once or twice, but the sound never becomes anything more than wind. You tell yourself it's only a matter of time. Rescue teams are surely already on their way. It's a military flight. They'll be tracking it. They'll triangulate your last known position. They'll know you didn't make it to Chile. In the morning you watch the sky. The clouds are scattered now, thin enough to let in some light. That feels like a good sign. You take turns standing on the slope, waving pieces of torn fabric, like flags every time you hear a distant noise. You line shiny scraps of fuselage across the snow, trying to form an SOS, Someone suggests arranging the bodies into a shape that might be seen from above. That idea is met with silence, then slow, grim nods. Anything that increases your chances. Anything at all. The first aircraft you spot is too far to hear, just a glint moving steadily across the sky. You wave anyway, scream, jump up and down on the slope. Everyone gathers, eyes fixed upward. You wait for it to circle back. It doesn't. By evening, your arms ache from signalling. Your voice is hoarse. The clouds return. You share what little food there is. A few squares of chocolate, a tin of mussels, some wine. The supply looks pitiful when laid out, but you pretend it's manageable. You divide it into rations, a bite here, a sip there. You chew slowly, savouring the salt, the sweetness, the memory of fullness. It lasts 2 days barely. No one says that aloud. You focus instead on melting snow in makeshift bowls. Helmets, scraps of aluminum, the metal bottoms of broken seat frames. It's slow work. Half of it evaporates or refreezes before you can drink. Still, the water is clean, icy. It burns a little going down, but it's water. Someone finds a transistor radio among the scattered bags. It doesn't transmit, but it does receive. You huddle around it, twisting the dial carefully. You pick up a crackling weather report, then static. Then, miraculously, a voice. Argentine air control. They're still looking. They mention a search zone far west of your actual position. It's a good thing. It means you're not forgotten. But it's also wrong. They think you crashed after crossing the Andes. They're combing the valleys on the other side. You are not there. Still, you hold on to that voice on the radio like it's a lifeline. You imagine a helicopter appearing over the ridge at any moment. Men dropping from ropes, blankets, stretchers, hot food. You start to believe you'll be telling this story from a hospital bed by next week. The first rescue will be the hardest, you reason. But once someone finds you, everything will follow. Supplies, evacuation, home. The fuselage becomes a kind of shelter. Sort of. You use seat cushions to insulate the gaps, blankets when you have them. Clothing is shared and reshared until you can't remember what belonged to whom. The cold is constant. It radiates through the floor, settles into your spine, creeps up from your feet until your legs feel hollow. You sleep in shifts, curled together in rows like spoons in a drawer, your breath frosting on each other's faces. Morale comes and goes in waves. Some people pray, some joke, about the food, about the toilet situation, about who snores the loudest. Gallows humour, but it works. Someone starts singing on the third night, a familiar rugby chant with most of the lyrics dropped or mumbled. Others join in. You laugh more than you expect to. It doesn't mean you're okay. It just means your body hasn't caught up with your circumstances. By day 4, the altitude begins to wear you down. 13,000 feet is not meant for people. Your heart races while you sit still. Every movement leaves you breathless. A walk 20 paces uphill feels like sprinting through water. Your lips crack, your nose bleeds, your fingertips turn numb and stay that way. The younger ones adjust faster. The older ones, barely in their 30s but suddenly ancient, begin to fade. You talk a lot about food, not about the dead, not about the chances of rescue, not about how much colder it's getting at night. Just food. You fantasize about steak, fresh bread, dulce de leche. Someone describes an entire meal, from their favourite cafe in Montevideo, down to the brand of soda and the pattern on the plate. The conversation lasts an hour. For that hour, you forget the taste of snow. You forget how thin your face has become. You pass the time by reorganising the wreckage, finding useful bits of metal or fabric, reinforcing the walls. It gives you something to do, even if you know it won't matter when the weather turns. There's a hole in the roof near the front of the fuselage. You try to patch it with seat backs and tape from a first aid kit. It leaks anyway. On day 5, you see another plane. This time, you're ready. You've built a crude mirror from a polished tray and some foil. You flash the sunlight upward. in deliberate, rhythmic patterns. You wave cloth, shout, stand on each other's shoulders. Nothing. It passes indifferent, smaller and smaller, until it's just a dot. It probably never saw you. Or worse, it saw something and didn't recognise it as human. People start to lose their voices, not from screaming, but from the dry air and the constant talking. The silence afterward feels wrong, heavier. You begin to realise how loud survival had been. The clatter of metal, the wind against the broken shell, the shuffle of bodies living and dead. Now there's less of that. Just breathing, just bones aching, just hope stretching thin like old elastic. By day 6, even the optimists have stopped saying, any day now. No one says much of anything. You listen to the radio 3 times a day, morning, midday, evening. Nothing new, just weather, just news from a world where you're not mentioned. Someone keeps a log, marking the days in a notebook that used to belong to the co-pilot. It's something to anchor you, a timeline, a way to make sense of the blur. When day 7 arrives, there's no announcement, no decision, just an absence. You stop checking the sky so often, stop running outside every time a breeze shifts the snow. You still listen for helicopters, but only half-heartedly. Your ears have been fooled too many times. You try not to think about what day 8 will look like. The chocolate is gone, the wine is nearly gone, the snow burns your throat less now, but that's not comforting. It just means you're used to it. You joke less, sleep more, or pretend to. There's still hope, but it's quieter now, brittle, like something left out in the cold too long. You still believe you'll be rescued. You just don't know if you'll be the same when it happens. It happens on the 10th day. Someone finally gets the radio working, not to transmit, just to listen. They spend half the afternoon twisting the dial, scanning through static, bursts of distant music, clipped voices that vanish before they can be understood. And then, all at once, something cuts through the white noise. Spanish, clear, official. A statement from the Chilean Air Force. You lean in, heart racing, certain it's the update you've been waiting for. The one where they say they've located the wreckage, that helicopters are inbound, that you'll be home by the weekend. Instead, you hear 5 words that rearrange your insides. The search has been called off. You don't understand at first. Someone asks them to repeat it. They do. The message is the same. Conditions are too dangerous. The terrain is too treacherous. The Andes are deep with snow, and the search grid has been exhausted. No sightings, no signals, no survivors. You are presumed dead. The voice on the radio is calm, factual, pitying even. It does not know you're listening. No one speaks for several minutes after the message ends. The silence feels like another avalanche, sudden and suffocating. You stare at the floor, which is just frost-covered metal now, and try to absorb what it means to be officially dead. It means no more helicopters, no more ground teams, no one searching satellite photos, no one scanning radar. It means the world has decided you're already gone, that you're not worth risking more lives to find, that the snow won. Someone finally breaks the silence by swearing, loud and bitter. Someone else shouts back, defensive, angry, maybe scared. A third voice tells them both to shut up. Then the arguments begin. Not just about the announcement, but about everything. Rations, space, noise, warmth, respect. Who gets to sleep where? Who's pulling their weight? The kinds of things that were manageable when hope was still holding the centre. Some try to rationalise the decision. They say maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe they'll restart the search tomorrow. Maybe it's politics, budgets, bureaucracy. Others lash out. They gave up on us, someone mutters. They didn't even find the right mountain. A few insist the real rescue is still coming. You find yourself nodding along, even if you don't believe it. Denial is easier to hold than despair. It has firmer edges. You can wrap your hands around it. A shift happens after the broadcast. Quiet at first, subtle, but undeniable. People start looking inward, instead of upward. Where once the group worked like a single organism, sharing everything, now cracks begin to form. Some try to take control, suggesting new routines, better rationing, more structure. Others resent that immediately. Who made you the leader? Who said we needed one? A democracy of survivors begins to fray under the pressure of cold and time. Still some step up. Nando, when he regains consciousness, becomes a calm presence, steady, practical, unflinching. Roberto, too. Others follow their lead, if only because they don't have a better idea. You begin to build patterns again. Who fetches snow? Who repairs the insulation? Who checks the bodies? Structure keeps you from unraveling completely, but it doesn't cure anything. Your body is changing. Everyone's is. You're thinner now, noticeably so. Your belt has 2 new holes. Your fingers are raw and purple. Some of the small cuts you barely noticed after the crash are now swollen, ringed with red. Infection moves quickly in the cold. One boy has a wound that smells wrong. Another has a fever. There's no medicine strong enough. No antibiotics, just cloth and hope. You do what you can, and then you stop, and then you wait. People cry more often now. Not in loud, dramatic bursts, but in quiet, private corners, into sleeves, into hands, into silence. It's not always the people you expect. One of the strongest players, broad-shouldered, never rattled on the field, sits curled in the tail section, one afternoon, rocking slightly, whispering names you don't recognise. You pretend not to see. You give him his space. Everyone needs somewhere to fall apart. The snow keeps falling. Not always hard, but always there. It erases your footprints by morning. It recovers the wreckage every night, as if the mountain is trying to reclaim what it coughed up. You spend more time inside now. There's nothing to signal, nothing to wave at. The planes have stopped coming. The only sound is wind and breathing, and sometimes the faint crunch of someone trying not to disturb the others. You try to keep busy. Busyness is a kind of defiance. You fix the insulation again. You make lists in your head. You count how many bites of food remain. You chew slowly, even if the piece is small enough to melt on your tongue. You savour the way it coats your teeth with memory. Not nourishment, just memory. Some talk about walking out, climbing over the mountains and finding help yourselves. Others scoff. You're surrounded by peaks that swallow even the sound of shouting. You'd need equipment, maps, food, things you don't have. And altitude sickness is a real threat now. You've already lost 2 to it. Maybe more. Not everyone dies, obviously. Some just drift off and don't come back. But the idea lingers. Someone draws a crude map. Someone else calculates distances based on what little they remember from geography class. Santiago is impossibly far. A Chilean village might be closer, but no one knows for sure. It's all theory. It's all frost-covered, maybe. There's a new silence now. Not just the quiet of the mountain, but the quiet between people. Fewer jokes, fewer songs. You used to sing in the evenings just to keep spirits up. Now the songs sound hollow, like they're being sung for the benefit of someone who isn't here anymore. You laugh less. Not because things aren't funny, some are, but because laughing feels like tempting fate, like you haven't earned it. At night, the cold pushes in harder. The wind has claws now. Even huddled together, you shiver so violently your teeth ache. You dream about warmth, and then wake up clutching someone else's hand, unsure who grabbed first. You still hope, just less loudly. You still believe, just with fewer words. The silence is louder than any engine now, and it doesn't fade. It waits, it watches, and it never runs out of fuel. Hunger arrives without ceremony. It doesn't burst through the door or announce itself with drama. It simply shows up one morning and decides not to leave. At first, it's a dull ache, a grumble low in your gut, easily dismissed with distraction or cold water. You tell yourself it's normal, that your body is just adjusting, that once the search resumes, and you still whisper when, not if, you'll be eating again soon. Real food, Hot food. Food with names and textures and smells that mean something. You say it enough times that your stomach almost believes you, but the ache sharpens. It begins to take shape, twisting, coiling, clawing at the inside of your ribs like a small animal. You wake up in the middle of the night with your hands pressed to your belly, hoping to still it. You try sleeping longer to avoid the hours you'd normally be eating. It doesn't help. Hunger is patient. It follows you into dreams. You see tables set with meals that never existed, bowls of steaming stew, baskets of warm bread. You reach out, and the bowl becomes your helmet filled with melted snow. The bread becomes your boot. You wake up chewing the inside of your cheek. You stop talking about food out loud. It feels dangerous now, sacred. You still think about it constantly. What you'd eat first, how fast you'd devour it, but you don't say it. Speaking it makes the absence feel sharper. Someone else mentions steak one morning, and is met with stares sharp enough to draw blood. The line between coping and cruelty has thinned. You try foraging. Of course you do. You hike the surrounding slopes in shifts, scanning for anything that might count. Moss, roots, insects. There's nothing. Just ice and stone and sky. One group finds a patch of something green and frozen, but it turns out to be lichen. They chew it anyway, spitting it out minutes later when the bitterness makes their tongues go numb. Another group stumbles across a sun-bleached animal bone. It's old, maybe from a condor or a mountain goat, but there's no flesh on it. Just a fragment of marrow that's already fossilized. You carry it back anyway. It feels like you should keep it. Melting snow becomes your main ritual. It takes hours to gather enough for even a small amount, and most of it evaporates or refreezes during the process. Still, it gives you something to do. You convince yourself it helps with the hunger, even if all it does is make you feel full of cold. The snow stings your teeth. Your gums bleed when you press down too hard with your tongue, but you drink it anyway. You always drink it. By the third week, your body starts to change in ways you can't ignore. Your belt dangles loose around your hips. Your fingers are too thin for your gloves. You run your hand through your hair and come away with more strands than you expected. You bury them in the snow. You don't want to look at them. Your nails are pale and brittle. Your skin peels in sheets from your knuckles and lips. The whites of your eyes turn a soft, unsettling yellow. Time bends. You stop tracking days with any conviction. The notebook someone was using as a log remains mostly untouched. Dates blur. Mornings and evenings are indistinguishable in the constant cloud and snow. You measure time in different ways now. By how long since the last radio update? How many people still speak above a whisper? How many times your stomach cramps in a day? Fainting becomes common. One boy collapses while trying to climb the slope for firewood you all know isn't there. He lies motionless for nearly 2 minutes before gasping awake. Another loses consciousness while speaking. His sentence ends halfway through. You carry him back into the fuselage and wrap him in what little insulation you have. He shivers violently for hours and doesn't speak for a full day afterward. You don't know if he's recovering or giving up. Irritability settles in like a fog. Everything grates. The sound of someone's breathing. The way someone else chews on a strip of fabric, like it might trick their jaw into thinking it's food. You snap at people you like. You avoid eye contact. You crave silence but can't stand the sound of it. Conversations grow short. Accusations surface and fade. Someone accuses another of hoarding food. There is no food to hoard. Still, the damage is done. You become obsessed with movement. You rock back and forth while sitting. You pace when you're able. You rub your hands together until the skin splits. Motion feels like control, and you'll take anything that feels like control. Others become still, too still. They lie in the same position, for hours unmoving, lips slightly parted, eyes half-lidded. When you check their breath, you're never entirely sure what you want to find. Your thoughts grow strange, detached. You start referring to yourself in third person in your head. You catch yourself watching others eat snow and feel a sharp, unreasonable anger. Not at them, but at your own mouth for not being satisfied. You cry once briefly and feel nothing afterward. Not relief, not shame, just nothing. Some people pray more often now, others stop entirely. Faith turns inward or vanishes. You start talking to yourself in whispers, even when someone else is beside you. You whisper things like, just another day, or you're still here, or don't think about it yet. You never finish those sentences. You don't want to know what comes next. The cold has stopped hurting the way it used to. That frightens you more than it relieves you. Numbness feels like forgetting. Your body stops warning you when you're in danger. Your toes feel like stone. Your fingertips like wax. You bite the inside of your mouth until it bleeds, just to prove you still can. You begin to dream of warmth less and dream of food more. But even in dreams, you never quite reach it. You see a kitchen, a bowl of soup. You reach out. The bowl dissolves. You wake up chewing on the drawstring of your coat. You spit it out. You chew it again minutes later. You know the names of the dead. You recite them in your head like liturgy. You don't count them anymore. There are too many. They sleep in the back of the fuselage now. Their faces covered. Their bodies frozen stiff, preserved, still. You try not to look at them, but you do. Everyone does. You can't help it. No one said it aloud. Not yet. But the thought is there. Quiet. Heavy. The hunger has changed shape again. It's not just ache now. It's suggestion. A calculation. You hear your stomach growl, and your mind fills in answers you don't want it to. You hear someone cough and wonder if they're getting weaker. You hate yourself for it. You do it anyway. You tell yourself it's temporary, that something will happen soon, that you just have to last another day, another hour after that. You tell yourself that until your voice gives out, and then you keep thinking it, because thinking costs fewer calories than speaking. No one says the word, not at first. It starts as a silence that lingers too long after someone asks what else there is to eat. A shrug that ends without an answer. A glance toward the rear of the fuselage that no one dares to follow. You try to laugh it off the first time someone says it, half whispered, in the dark, voice trembling and thin. Not a proposal, not a plan. Just a possibility. Something that could be done. If things got worse, if no one came, if the cold kept you here longer than any of you were meant to survive. You don't react immediately. No one does. There's a pause, then a shift in topic, a return to safer ground. Someone suggests eating leather, boiling seat covers, trying to catch a bird, if there were any birds. There aren't. Just wind, snow, sky, and the dead. Always the dead, silent in the back of the plane, their shapes stiff under layers of frost and clothing, their names still in your mouth, their faces still in your memory. That's what makes it so unthinkable. They're not strangers, they're friends, teammates, brothers. The thought doesn't go away. It lingers, quietly, at the edge of every conversation about food, every mention of rationing, every growling stomach. You all pretend not to notice that it's taking longer for people to reject the idea when it surfaces again. The suggestion grows more detailed, more hypothetical. Not anyone who's alive, obviously. Just the ones who died already. Just to survive. Just until rescue. Just enough to live. There's no vote, no declaration. The conversation happens in fragments, whispered between people who already suspect they're not the only ones thinking it. Some raise objections, religious, moral, human. One boy refuses to entertain the idea at all. He curls into himself and prays louder and longer than usual. Another says it's a sin, unforgivable, a desecration of the body. But others point to scripture, the Eucharist, the Last Supper. This is my body, given for you. They say survival is not a sin. Starving to death when salvation lies within reach. Maybe that's the sin instead. You remember the priest who was with you, Father Peña. He died early. His body is still among the others. Someone asks what he would have said. No one knows for sure. Some say he'd understand. Others say he'd weep. Either way, he's not here to speak for himself. He's part of the choice now, whether you want him to be or not. Eventually, the conversations become practical, methodical, cold. What part would you use first? Who would do it? How would you keep it clean? Who wouldn't have to see it? You try not to listen, but you do. You hear it all. You think about how much weight has already slipped off your frame, how your legs shake when you stand, how the snow no longer stings the way it used to. There's no sudden decision, no group agreement shouted over the wind. It just unfolds, 1 hour bleeding into the next, until someone stands, blade in hand, and walks slowly toward the back of the fuselage. No one stops him. That's the part you'll remember. Not the cut, not the colour, not the sound, but the stillness of the rest of you. The way the group went quiet and let it happen. The way everyone pretended, in that moment, not to see. The blade is small, a broken piece of aluminum sharpened against rock. It catches light in a dull shimmer, not enough to glint. The boy holding it isn't the strongest, not the loudest, but he's steady, or at least steadier than the rest of you. His hands shake, of course they do, but not enough to stop him. He kneels beside one of the bodies, the coat already unzipped, the frost already lifted from the surface. The skin underneath is firm, pale, cold in a way that makes your own bones ache in sympathy. He doesn't speak. No one does. The group watches from a respectful distance, some with their backs turned, others staring as if willing themselves to forget, while still committing every detail to memory. The first incision is shallow, not enough pressure. He adjusts, presses harder, cuts deeper. There's no blood, just tissue, muscle. The colour of it is wrong, not what you'd expect, something between pink and grey, as though even the flesh has started to forget what it's for. He works quickly, methodically, as if he's doing something ordinary, a chore, a necessity. The meat is separated into pieces, wrapped in cloth placed in the cleanest container you can find. No one says the word. No one calls it meat, or food, or what it is. You refer to it in fragments, the supplies, the portions, the thing. Language stumbles where the mind refuses to follow. The first meal is small, a sliver for each person who agrees. There's no fire this time, just raw slices left out in the snow to stay cold. Someone suggests drying it like jerky, but you don't have the tools or the patience. The meat is dense, rubbery. It doesn't tear easily. You chew more than you expected. You swallow faster than you'd like. The taste is mild, barely anything, but the aftertaste lingers like metal, like coins held too long in the mouth. You don't look at anyone while you eat. You stare at the wall, at the sky, at the floor, at your hands if you need to. One boy cries while he chews, barely making a sound. Another mutters a prayer under his breath before each bite. You take yours in silence. The meat is cold, but it sits warm in your stomach. That warmth feels like betrayal. You don't know who you're betraying, yourself, your friend, the body it came from, but the feeling won't go away. Not everyone eats. One girl refuses completely. She moves to the other side of the fuselage, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes fixed on the bodies. She says she won't do it, that it's wrong, that it's murder, even if they were already dead. No one argues with her. There's nothing to say. You understand her. You did the same, until the first bite. The portions are divided as fairly as possible. Someone keeps track, unofficially. You make sure those who helped prepare it get their share. You don't talk about favourites. You don't talk about the math. But the math is there, in the background of everything. How much weight remains, how many days it might last, how many people are left to feed. You try to be respectful, whatever that means now. You avoid recognisable parts. You keep the faces covered. You store what's left in the clean snow, far enough from the fuselage that the cold does the work of preservation without becoming something you see every time you step outside. Even in this place, you try to keep some kind of boundary between the living and the dead. Those who don't eat begin to weaken, not dramatically, not at first, just slower movements, longer naps, missed turns at chores. You watch them out of the corner of your eye, wondering how long they'll hold out. One boy faints while fetching water. Another can't stop shaking, even in the warmest spot of the cabin. You offer them food. They refuse. You stop offering. You keep telling yourself this is temporary, that the choice you made, this one terrible thing, will one day be part of a larger story. A story with rescue, with relief, with home. You imagine telling it to someone else years later. You imagine how they'll look at you afterward. You imagine not telling it at all. The silence that follows the first cut doesn't go away. It deepens. It curls into the corners of the fuselage, threads between your ribs, settles at the base of your throat. People talk less now. Even the jokes have stopped. When someone speaks, they do it quietly, carefully, as if their voice might break something. You lie in your seat, curled into yourself, and try not to think about what you've done. But you do. Every time you close your eyes. Every time you take another bite. Every time you look at the empty place where someone used to sit. You survived another day. That's supposed to be the goal. But the mountain is quiet. And so are you. You're starting to believe in a rhythm. Not comfort, not hope, but a kind of predictability. A system of survival built from what little you can control. The days have a shape now. Snow collection, rationing, insulation repairs, silence. You know who speaks and who doesn't. Who wakes first, who has started to sleep through everything. You know the sound of someone sobbing 2 layers of blankets away. You've learned how to chew without thinking, how to look without seeing. It's not life, but it's something like staying alive. And then the mountain moves. It happens on day 17 in the middle of the night, when the air is sharpest and the cold is too deep for dreams. One moment you're asleep, or close to it, and the next you're hearing something you can't name. A low groan, not quite wind, not quite thunder. The sound of pressure finally giving way. It's not loud, not at first. It's a heavy hush, like breath being drawn in across miles of snow. Then the fuselage lurches. It tips at a slow, unnatural angle, and then comes the impact, sudden, deafening, a roar of snow and weight and cracking metal. You don't have time to scream. You barely have time to move. The ceiling caves in, or maybe it's the wall. You can't tell anymore. Snow floods through every opening, burying bodies, choking space. It comes in like water, but heavier. You feel it slam into your chest, force its way into your mouth, fill your ears. You try to claw upward, but you don't know which way that is. When the snow stops moving, the silence returns, but it's different now. Pressed. Dense. You are packed in place, one arm free, the rest of you pinned beneath a mound of cold, so tight it feels solid. Your breath is shallow, panicked. You try to call out, but there's no room for your voice. Only a muffled rasp. You hear someone screaming nearby, their voice getting thinner with each second. Someone else is sobbing. Then nothing. You don't know how long you stay like that. Minutes, hours. Time collapses in the dark. You go lightheaded. You lose the edge of panic. Not because you're calm, but because your body's too tired to care. The snow has frozen to your clothes. It leaches warmth from your skin, your muscles, your lungs. You feel yourself drifting, and it would be easy, so easy, to let it take you. But something shifts. A faint pressure lifts from your chest. Someone is digging. A voice you recognize, hoarse and terrified, is shouting your name. You can't answer. You move your fingers instead. A hand grabs yours and doesn't let go. It takes 2 more hours to pull you free. The air inside the wreck is worse than the snow. It's humid, sharp with sweat, fear, and something else. Something sour and animal. The bodies that were too close to the opening are gone, swept away into the dark. Others are buried too deep to reach. Some are still partially visible, arms outstretched, mouths open, eyes frozen wide. 8 more are dead. Just like that. No warning, no reason, just more subtraction. You don't ask who, you just count the absences. The way the space inside the fuselage feels larger now, emptier, like the mountain hollowed it out, just to remind you who's in charge. The snow sealed every exit. There's no light, no airflow, just breathing, stale and hot and growing thinner. The insulation you built is gone, crushed. You huddle together for warmth again, but it's different now. It's not just the cold outside, it's the closeness, the smell, the knowledge that you are buried alive and there's no rescue coming. Claustrophobia sets in quickly, even among those who thought they were beyond fear. You hear arguments over inches of space. Someone snaps because someone else won't stop coughing. The darkness has shape now, sharp edges, corners that press in on your skull. You can't tell if your eyes are open. You touch your own face just to confirm that you still exist. The air grows thick, breathing takes effort. Each inhale feels harder than the last. You ration oxygen the way you used to ration food, taking turns, moving less, trying not to speak. It doesn't work. Your thoughts come slower now, sluggish, dull. You sleep more, but it doesn't restore anything. You wake up just as tired, just as scared. It takes 3 days to dig out. 3 days of clawing at packed snow with frozen hands, using shards of metal and broken seat frames to push upward toward the light. 3 days of silence, punctuated by collapse. You lose tools, you lose fingernails, you lose your voice. But eventually, the wall breaks. A pocket of cold air rushes in. Dim daylight filters through. The world still exists. You almost wish it didn't. When you crawl out, the sky is clear. The slope above is smooth again, as though nothing happened. As though the mountain didn't just swallow nearly a third of what remained. The others follow behind, blinking against the light, shielding their eyes like moles emerging from underground. No one speaks for a while. There's nothing to say. You return to the wreck. You start over. Again. You patch the fuselage as best you can. You rebuild your insulation. You count what's left of your supplies. You try not to look at the blood on the walls, the twisted metal, the clothes still frozen to the floor. You think about the ones you lost, the ones who lasted 17 days only to be taken in seconds. You want to scream, but you don't. The mountain isn't listening. Something inside you shifts that day. Not breaks exactly, just settles. As if you've finally accepted that there is no line. No moment of clarity or redemption, waiting on the other side. Just the next thing. The next breath, the next loss. You thought you were getting better. That maybe survival had a pattern you could follow. A system you could trust. But the mountain doesn't care about your rhythm. It doesn't notice when you begin to hope again. It doesn't see your effort. It doesn't respond to kindness or prayer or logic. It just waits. And when it's ready, it takes. You chew slowly now. Not because you're savouring anything, but because there's nothing left to savour. The pieces are smaller these days, colder, harder to separate from the rest of your thoughts. You don't look at what you're eating. You look just to the side, at a seam in the fuselage wall, or at your own hands, or at the blank white beyond the nearest crack in the insulation. You lie to yourself, quietly, professionally, that you're doing them a kindness by surviving, that they would have wanted this, that their bodies mean something more if they help you live. You lie and you chew, and no one corrects you. The group is smaller now. The avalanche took 8. The cold took 2 more. Infection, another. Fewer bodies means more space inside the wreck, but it doesn't feel like a gain. It feels like an echo chamber, a place where everything is too loud or too quiet, never in between. At night, there's a kind of hush that feels artificial, like the silence in a house after all the furniture's been moved out. You can still hear people breathing, shifting, crying, but fewer of them, always fewer. The cold feels sharper now, not because the temperature has dropped, though it has, but because you've lost your layers, literal and otherwise. More jackets have been repurposed as blankets. More skin is exposed. Your face stings whenever the wind changes direction. Your toes don't hurt anymore. You've stopped deciding whether that's a good thing. You're still sharing everything. Heat, water, routines, but not conversation. That stopped sometime after the avalanche. Not completely, but enough that you've noticed. Most people speak only when necessary. Short words, fewer questions. You stopped telling stories, you stopped reminiscing. The only memories anyone shares now are logistical. When was the last time we collected snow? How much longer will the meat last? Who's next to sleep by the insulation? No one asks what you dreamed about. No one admits they're still dreaming. Some have retreated into prayer. Quiet, personal rituals muttered under breath or traced in snow. Others have retreated into silence entirely. One boy hasn't spoken in 5 days. You're not sure if he's stopped by choice or because he's run out of things worth saying. He still helps with tasks, still nods when given instruction, but his eyes are hollow in a way you've learned not to look at too long. Like staring at the place your own mind might go next. Injuries linger now, even the minor ones. A cracked rib from the avalanche, a deep blister that became an open sore. Someone dropped a metal rod on their foot, and the swelling hasn't gone down. You try to improvise. You boil snow and press it into wounds. You use strips of fabric as bandages. One of the older boys tried to reset a dislocated shoulder. The sound it made still haunts the back of your jaw. No one screamed, but someone bit through their own lip to stay quiet. The smell has changed. It's hard to explain, but it's there. Beneath the layers of damp cloth and breath and blood, there's something else now. Something sweet and rotting and faintly chemical. It seeps through the seams of the fuselage, clings to your clothes, works its way under your fingernails. You clean yourself with snow, but it doesn't come off. You carry it with you, even outside. You smell it in your dreams. You've stopped counting days. You think someone else still is, but you haven't asked. Your internal calendar gave up weeks ago. There's light and dark. There's sleeping and waking. There's the hour before you eat and the hour after. That's as much as you track. You think about how long you've been here and realise you don't have a number. Just a feeling, a weight behind the eyes, a stiffness in the joints that doesn't go away no matter how long you rest. You've also stopped picturing your old life. Not because it hurts, but because it's hard to remember. You can still recall names, faces, specific rooms, but you don't remember how you used to speak, how you moved when you weren't cold, how it felt to walk across a floor without slipping. You assume you had jokes, preferences, a favourite meal, but they've gone soft in your memory, like paper left out in the rain. Still there, just blurred. No one talks about rescue anymore. Not really. Sometimes someone says, if we make it out, and no one answers. It's not bitterness. It's not even hopelessness. It's just the understanding that hoping out loud feels indulgent. There's too much work in staying alive to imagine anything after it. You've stopped expecting the sound of engines, stopped scanning the sky. You still notice when birds don't fly by, when planes don't appear, but you don't react. You just take another breath and move on to whatever's next. At night, the pain sets in hardest. Not sharp pain, but deep, slow. The ache in your knees from hunching, the burn in your hips from lying on metal, the dull throb in your back from lifting bodies, from carrying snow, from staying upright longer than you should. You stretch sometimes, but your muscles feel unfamiliar, like they belong to someone else and you're only borrowing them badly. The crying never really stopped. It's just become quieter, more private. People bury their faces in cloth. They press their hands to their mouths. You recognise the sound of someone trying not to sob. You hear it 2 seats over. Then again, closer. Then from yourself. You tell yourself it's condensation on the walls, the wind, a noise in your head. It's easier than acknowledging how close grief still lives to the surface. You lie awake more often now. Sleep is harder. The cold seeps in too fast and the dreams are less kind than before. Sometimes you dream you're already dead. Not as a nightmare, just as fact. You wake up and don't feel startled. You just feel wrong. You shift your weight. You listen to the breathing around you. You close your eyes again and wait for the next morning to come. Though you're not sure why. You're still here. You still eat. You still speak when it's your turn. You hold someone's hand when they're too weak to do it themselves. You take your share. You give your help. You survive. That's the word people still use. But you don't feel like something that survived. You feel like something that endured, just long enough to forget who you used to be. 2 of them go. You stay. Maybe you offered. Maybe you didn't. Maybe your legs couldn't handle the climb, or your chest had grown too tight with altitude. Maybe someone else was stronger, younger, more determined. Or maybe you just didn't want to see what was out there. You told yourself the hike was hopeless, that no one could make it through that wall of snow and rock. But the truth is simpler. You stayed because the wreck, for all its horror, was still the only thing that felt like shelter, even when it was a tomb. They leave early. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, 2 of the strongest among you, wrapped in makeshift boots and salvaged layers. They carry nothing that resembles true equipment. No maps, no compass, just a sleeping bag sewn from seat covers, a bit of meat wrapped in plastic, and the blind, stubborn belief that something must exist beyond this stretch of white. You watch them climb, their figures growing smaller with each step, swallowed slowly by the slope. You watch until the snow hides them completely, and then you wait. You expect their corpses to return first, not their voices, not help. Just their bodies found days later, frozen in place, faces contorted by wind and time. It seems more realistic, more in line with how things have gone so far. You picture it when you sleep, when you melt snow, when you sit alone inside the fuselage with your knees drawn to your chest. The mountain doesn't forgive optimism. It buries it. The days that follow stretch thin. You don't measure them in hours. You stopped doing that long ago. But you feel each one in your bones, in the tightening of your joints, in the way silence spreads like frost between the survivors still left behind. The group is smaller now. Another boy dies during the first night after the hike begins. He didn't speak much anyway. When you find him, his hands are tucked under his chin, as if he were praying or dreaming, or already halfway gone. You add his body to the store. There's no other word for it now. No more pretending, no more euphemisms. You carve what you can, freeze the rest. Someone tries to offer a few words, something respectful, something resembling a eulogy, but the cold takes their breath halfway through, and they never finish the sentence. You eat that night without speaking. Another follows a few days later. This one slower. He was refusing food, or maybe just tired of the taste. You watched him drift for days, his eyes growing glassy, his skin stretched thin across his cheekbones. You wanted to help. You told yourself you would. But by then, help had become an abstract idea, something for other people, something far away. Inside the fuselage, the air is sour and damp. You've stopped trying to clean. There's no point. The floor is slick with melted snow and spilled broth. The walls drip from condensation. You light a fire when you can, just long enough to warm fingers, to sear a few thin slices of meat. It smokes and stinks, and you let it. You let everything. Conversation is nearly gone. You grunt now, nod, raise an eyebrow. The most important decisions are made in silence. Someone looks at the food. Someone else gestures toward the snow. You understand. You go. You fetch more. It all happens without language, as if you've reverted to a simpler version of yourself, as if words were too expensive to use. You start dreaming in pieces, vague colours, hands that don't belong to anyone, rooms without doors. Sometimes you dream of Parado and Canessa walking into the sun. Sometimes you dream of them falling. Sometimes you dream of nothing at all, and that's worse. You wake unsure if you were ever asleep. Someone in the group begins talking to someone who isn't there. Not all the time, just occasionally. A murmur, a quiet laugh, a lullaby whispered to the corner of the wreck. No one stops him. It doesn't seem worth the energy. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it's still better than screaming. The waiting becomes its own kind of ritual. You check the slope each morning. You stare up at the same line of rocks and snow, looking for movement, for figures, for anything that breaks the horizon. You see nothing. Always nothing. You wonder if you imagined them leaving, if they ever left at all. Some nights you think about going after them. You picture yourself climbing the ridge, walking into the cold with no direction, no plan. You imagine walking until you can't anymore, then lying down in the snow, letting the mountain take you. The thought doesn't scare you. It calms you in a strange way, like an option you've kept in your back pocket, just in case. But you stay, because you're tired, because the hike is a myth, because every time someone tries to leave, they vanish into white, and you've run out of room to bury belief. You stay because staying is all you know how to do now. You chew your food slowly. You drink melted snow that tastes faintly of smoke and aluminum. You stretch your legs when you remember to. You listen for footsteps you know won't come today, or tomorrow, or maybe ever. You sleep in bursts and wake in confusion. You stopped counting the days, because counting what? You're not sure how many of you are left. You think it's 9. It might be 10. You forget sometimes who's gone and who's just sleeping. You forget your own face. You forget what your voice used to sound like when it was warm, but you remember them. 2 shapes vanishing into white, and part of you still hopes. Even now, even here, you see the helicopter before you believe it. A flicker of motion in the sky, too small to matter at first. You stare at it like you've stared at every trick of light and wind for weeks, expecting it to dissolve as you blink. But this one doesn't melt. It holds its shape. It grows larger. You feel something stir in your chest that you're afraid to name. No one speaks, not until the sound hits. Distant at first, then rising like thunder, then loud enough to shake the metal beneath your feet. And still, no one moves. You all just stand there, afraid that if you step forward, it'll vanish like the last bit of dream you almost remembered. It is December 20th, the day you're spotted. 16 survivors clinging to a piece of wreckage halfway up the Andes. Parado and Canessa did it. They found someone. They began their hike almost 2 months after the crash, walked for 8 days and made it out. They told the world where you were. It should feel impossible. It does. You feel like you've been found in another lifetime, like you died already. And this is the part that plays after. The helicopter can't take everyone. There's not enough room. It lands awkwardly in the snow, kicking up a storm of powder and wind and noise that feels like it could push you back into the mountain. You don't rush it. No one does. There's a list now, a plan, names spoken aloud like boarding calls at the edge of the world. You're among the first, or maybe you're not. You can't remember. You just know you're not last. And someone is. Someone is left behind for one more night. You hug them, or touch their shoulder, or say nothing at all. There's no ceremony, no real goodbye. You don't say, "See you soon." You don't promise anything. You just leave. You step into the metal belly of the machine that was supposed to come weeks ago. It roars around you, engine heat washing over your face, your hands, your eyes that don't want to close even though they're dry and burning. The interior smells like fuel and plastic and something else. Something human. Clean sweat, machine oil, fresh breath. You haven't smelled anything like it in so long, it hurts. A rescuer offers you a blanket. Another places a hand on your shoulder and asks your name. You try to answer, but the words get caught somewhere behind your teeth. You nod instead. You keep nodding. That seems to be enough. You don't look out the window as the wreck disappears beneath you. You don't want to see it from above. You don't want to see what it looks like now, that it's not your whole world. You close your eyes instead and try not to imagine the ones still inside it. When you land, they carry you more than you walk. Someone puts something in your hands, a cup of broth or tea or soup, and you hold it like it might vanish if you blink too hard. You don't drink it immediately, you just breathe it in. Steam curls around your nose, your lips, your eyelashes. It smells like salt and fat and warmth. You cry, but not for the reasons you expected. A woman wraps you in a coat that isn't yours. You feel hands on your arms, your face, your chest. Not searching, just confirming, checking for frostbite, for broken bones, for signs of what you've become. They ask questions gently, but you still don't know how to answer them. What happened? How many are dead? How did you survive? You don't tell them. Not really. You nod again. You say, we made it, you say. Some didn't. You leave out the parts about the knife, about the silence, about what you've been eating. You tell them what they want to hear. They take your picture. They ask again for your name. They write it down carefully, like it might be misspelled, like you might have forgotten how to spell it yourself. They tell you that your family's waiting, that the press wants to talk to you, that people are calling it a miracle. You nod. You nod again. You can't stop nodding. The second helicopter goes back the next morning. It collects the rest. You're reunited that evening, sitting around a table none of you recognise, wearing clothes that fit badly and holding forks that feel too heavy. You glance at each other and realise you don't know who went first, who made it out before the others, who was left behind. You don't ask, you just eat, slowly, mechanically, as if you're still waiting to wake up with snow in your mouth. They call you survivors. They say it with admiration, with awe, with trembling hands and glossy eyes. You nod when they say it, but you don't feel like a survivor. You feel like something pulled from wreckage, dusted off, cleaned up just enough to look human again. You feel hollow, like the mountain took something you haven't yet named and won't give back. You sleep in a bed that night, a real one, with sheets and pillows and no metal under your spine. You lie on your side and stare at the wall, trying to remember what it felt like to want sleep. The room is too warm, too quiet. The absence of wind feels unnatural. You miss the sound of breathing around you. You miss the weight of a coat across your feet. You don't know what that means. You survived. That's what they say. They write it in headlines, speak it into microphones, type it into articles with bold fonts and solemn expressions. 16 survive against all odds. They call it a miracle. They call you brave. They say you proved what the human spirit can endure. But you know better. The miracle would have been not being there at all. The miracle would have been an uneventful flight, a safe landing, and a forgettable trip across the Andes. The miracle would have been not needing to become what you became. Instead, you become a story. The press descends before your body finishes thawing. They want details, photos, interviews, names. They want to hear about the moment the plane went down, the avalanche, the rescue. But what they really want is the part no one wants to say out loud. They ask gently, at first, then directly. Did you eat them? How did it taste? Did you feel ashamed? You answer carefully, or not at all. Some survivors speak freely. Some hold the line. You watch yourself become a symbol in someone else's narrative, one they can read from a safe distance, long after they've finished their lunch. The world wants you to be grateful, and you are, sort of. You're grateful for breath, for a mattress, for sunlight that doesn't hurt your skin, but gratitude doesn't cancel guilt. It doesn't erase the cold that still clings to your bones. It doesn't stop the images from flashing across the backs of your eyelids when you close your eyes too long. You don't feel lucky. You feel unfinished, like something half buried, half built, not entirely returned. Your family welcomes you back with tears, embraces, shaking hands. Some can't stop touching you, as if to confirm you're real. Others hesitate, unsure of where to begin. There are letters, flowers, casseroles, offers of counselling. You hear someone say, "He's a different person now," and they mean it kindly. But they're right, you are different, and not in the way they imagine. Some people don't know how to react at all. They avert their eyes, they speak softly around you. A few distance themselves completely. A friend you grew up with stops answering your calls. A relative changes the subject when your name comes up. You don't blame them. You barely know what to say to yourself. When people ask how it was, you say, hard. When they ask what you ate, you say what we had to. And when they press, you walk away. The other survivors understand. Mostly, you share something that doesn't translate into language. A private vocabulary of glances, silences, unspoken weight. You stay in touch more or less. There are reunions, letters, check-ins. You speak of the mountain sometimes, but not always. Not everyone wants to remember. Some want to remember everything. Others want to forget so badly it changes the way they move through the world. You try not to take it personally. Years pass, you go on with your life. That's the phrase people use. You've gone on. You get older. Maybe you marry, maybe you don't. Maybe you have children, and maybe you never tell them the full story. You learn to answer the questions in polite, digestible ways. You say it was difficult, it changed me, it taught me things. You don't say it hollowed me out and left me with shadows that still stretch across my breakfast table. That doesn't fit well into conversation. Therapists ask about nightmares. Sometimes you lie, sometimes you don't. You tell them about the silence, the whiteness, the way your stomach still clenches at the smell of burning fabric. You don't always tell them about the guilt, the strange heavy kind that comes not just from what you did, but from what you lived through, from knowing that 16 people came home, and dozens didn't, from knowing you were chosen by accident. The mountain doesn't change. It doesn't melt. It doesn't move. It stays frozen, towering, untouched in the background of your life. You see pictures of it sometimes, in books, documentaries, commemorative plaques. It's beautiful, from a distance, serene, white and cold and still. But you know better. You know how it sounds when it shifts in the night. You know how it smells when the bodies start to thaw. You know what kind of silence it keeps. There are memorials now, pilgrimages, stones carved with names. Some survivors return. A few go often, as if trying to make peace with something that won't offer it. You go once. You stand where the fuselage used to be, and you feel your chest tighten like the air is thinner than you remember. You say a few words. You don't remember what they were. You stay for an hour, maybe two. Then you leave. You don't go back. People ask if the experience made you stronger. You say yes because it's easier than explaining the truth. What it really made you was quieter, slower, more deliberate. You watch people more closely now. You hesitate before making promises. You understand what people are capable of when pushed to the edge, including yourself. You learn to live around the silence, the one inside you and the one between you and the rest of the world. You don't try to fill it anymore. You let it be. It's not something you heal from. It's something you carry, something you accommodate. Some days it feels light. Other days it presses against your ribs like frost. You learn how to breathe around it. You left the mountain, but not all of you left. That brings us to the end of tonight's slow descent. Not a tale of triumph, but of survival stripped to its barest, most bitter bones. If you're still listening, thank you for walking through the cold with me, and for bearing witness to a kind of endurance that doesn't celebrate itself. If you'd like early access to more quietly horrifying stories like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other historical topics you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chronicler, Andrew S. Sleep well.